I have in my hand here a kitchen TV mounting bracket, okay? So the first thing to note about it is how compact the entire bracket is. It's very neat. So normally the way for mounting a TV is simply to mount the bracket onto a wall and come off the wall then directly out and support the bracket. Now this bracket here is different in terms of we're going to actually support the television from above, bring down a bracket which will then support the TV. So what comes in the actual kit that I just showed? Well, you have a reasonably detailed set of instructions which you can see here. We have the actual bracket here which we can see. So there's two parts to this bracket. This part of the bracket which we can see here mounts onto the back of the television, and this part here will actually mount directly onto either underneath a cabinet or possibly onto a ceiling or you know, some type of a step out. Okay. Now, what are the other components that come in it? Well, there's a series of screws and bolts here. So in terms of the bolts here, there's 4 bolts needed for bolting it onto the TV, and there's 5 different sizes and thread lengths, etc. that are here. There's also 4 washers here, which will actually just allow us to mount it more safely. And then when we actually come to mount the bracket onto the wall, we have plugs and screws. Now, if we're mounting directly into timber, we'll only need the screws. So if we're mounting underneath a cabinet, something like that. And then if we'll need the plugs here, obviously if we're drilling and mounting into concrete. Now, something that's worth noting on this is that this design, so if we can imagine here that we have this bolted onto a underneath cabinet, we're just going to open this here. It's deliberately quite stiff, okay? If we're using this for looking at TV and something like this, and afterwards we're finished looking at the TV, we can actually fold it away simply by folding it back like this and have the TV all but hidden, okay? So from that perspective it's quite good. So what size of televisions can we use this with? Well, we can use it with anywhere from a 13-inch all the way up to a 23-inch TV. And you might wonder then and say, is my particular television going to be suitable for it? How do I know? Well, there's an international standards in terms of how TV brackets are designed. So with smaller televisions, it's called the VESA standard, so VESA, and it's based really on hole center distances. So what we'll be looking at here is, if we look at this bracket here, it can actually cover 3 different hole centers. So the smallest ones here, from this slot to this slot, it's centered 50 millimeters. From the next standard, it's 75 between. So that's the VESA standard 50, VESA 50, and the outer 100 millimeters is the VESA 100 standard. Okay, so if we actually just pull my television into focus here, we're going to do now. What we'll note here is, and I'm just going to grab a measuring tape to demonstrate this. I'm just going to turn over this television here and we'll just see actually what the actual size of this television is. And this is basically a 15-inch TV. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to note from center to center, either left or right or top to bottom. If we come along here, I can see that the distance here is 75 millimeters. So we know anyway, it's the VESA 75, and we know, let's say, from this bracket here that it covers these 3 ranges. So it's the middle bracket here that'll be of interest to us. Okay. So what we need to do is we want to make sure that we're going to mount it in the right manner. Okay. So let's think about how it's going to be mounted. So this will be screwed in. So this needs to bolt into the back of the television. So if we actually come along and just grab the middle slots here and just slide it into position, okay? So starting here, so we're trying to line up with this and this. So you can see initially the holes are lining up quite well. Just slide it down along and it's slotted in there like that, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up these 4 washers here and I'm just going to go for the 4 smallest nuts here, which I just know from just a previous quick check that I did will suit this quite well. What we do is we come along and we simply screw it in. Okay, and we repeat the process on the other 4 corners. We don't screw all the way in initially, I'd say just lightly, because we need to have a little bit of flexibility here. this one here. So we have a little bit of flexibility here where we can actually slide this up and down now if we wanted it, as long as you have no overlay tight with the screws. So we could just slide it up and down depending on how close or how far away from the actual the area we're bolting in we want. So we just tighten it in at that point. So it locks in quite well. We can see we can actually pick up the television now with this bracket here, okay? So what we do at that point is, in this scenario here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mount it underneath the cabinet here, okay? Now the first thing is, it's right next to a cooker, so obviously in reality we'd never do this, but for this particular scenario, I'm just going to demonstrate here. So we have these plugs and these screws. Now because I'm not going to be mounting it to concrete, I don't need these plugs, I'll just leave them here. So what we can do then is, we can just bring it over here. Now obviously in reality, what I might well do is, I might have come along and without the television mounted on, I might have drilled out a number of guide holes here, okay? So we have a few choices in terms of where we're going to mount it here, but basically using the 4 corner pieces would be normal. So what we do is we simply hold up the bracket, like this, and we get a drill and we drill it. So we can see here, where I've slotted it in now, because there's a reveal down like this, it's not going to work so well. So what I'd normally have done is, I would need it to have slid this further up along here. So it's quite a useful mistake today. So that's why we need the actual little bit of play in it, in case we have something standing back. Where if we're bolting it onto a completely smooth surface, where it was straight across in terms of the timber, then it would work perfectly as it is here. So what we'll come along then is simply drill the 4 guide holes, come along, and use the screws, and once again the same Phillips screwdriver that I used earlier, and just screw it into position. And then we'd have our TV mounted here, and if we're not using the television, we'd simply fold it over, and we can see we'd have it mounted there neatly out of the way. So the distance that we need to have this out from the wall again, which you can see here again, it's somewhat dependent on if we want to be able to fold it back afterwards. It's somewhat dependent on the distance from the wall and obviously the size of the television, but that's just straightforward common sense. So this actually is quite a nice bracket, and it nicely complements the fairly comprehensive range of TV brackets that are stock on tvtrade.ie. We simply added this on because, you know, there is particular scenarios with it. It's a relatively low cost bracket. You don't need very complicated tools for mounting it. You can see that you could basically do the whole job with a Phillips screwdriver, and effectively the bracket is coming fully pre-assembled. So the full range of TV wall mounting brackets that are associated with this also are available on the tvtrade.ie website, and each of which comes with its own demonstration video on how to install. So that's it anyway, an overview of the kitchen TV mounting bracket.